You may not know this, but your synth can make weather. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you how to make storm sounds, wind, rain, and thunder on any analog synthesizers. You can even do it on soft synths. And I'm going to show you how to make each of these sounds at a beginner level, at an intermediate level, and at advanced level. And once you're done with this video, you're going to be master of weather. Hi, I'm DAWless, and today we're going to get into how to make storm sounds on a synthesizer, classic hardware analog synthesizers. Now, why would you want to make weather sounds? Why not just reach for a sample? Well, there's a couple of reasons. You may not have access to high quality samples, and a storm is hiding right inside of your synth. And second, manipulating noise and working with noise is one of the essential sound design skills for any DAWless performer or any synthesizer aficionado. You can use almost any synth for this. It doesn't have to be a polyphonic synth, but it does help if you have more than one filter, and as we'll see, it does help if you have effects that you can apply in order to stereoize the sound and to add some breadth and girth to it. These kind of sounds can be used for ambient music. They can be used as little accents and ear candy in whatever you're producing. And they're really important part of any synth performer's repertoire. See you on the other side. All right, let's get going with storm sounds on any synthesizer. Today we have the mighty Korg Multi here. It's a virtual analog beast that can do almost anything, but you can use any monophonic synthesizer. It will do just fine, or a polyphonic synth for that matter. We're going to go through 3 levels of making each component of the storm. We're going to start with wind, we're going to move to rain, and then we're going to go to thunder. Of course, the idea is we want to put all this stuff together in the end. So number 1, wind. How to make it? Well, we start with the noise. We have a noise oscillator here. Just basically white noise. We have a control here where we can control what's called speckle here. It's basically going to be a bit of a filtering. So this is more of a brownish pinkish noise. And with more speckle we get that higher frequency content. For wind, I'm going to remove all the speckle so that we're emphasizing the lower range. The key thing for wind, your beginner level, is using the cutoff. We want a low pass filter. I'm using the Monopoly low pass filter here. Okay. And we want to dial in the setting, maybe somewhere 40%. Sounds pretty windy already. The other key control here is the resonance. The more resonance you add, the more of the whistling you will hear. So here's that whistling, like when there are small spaces wind is going through. Maybe something like this. So this is already pretty good. We can add an envelope if we want to this, with some attack and some release. You can see it right here. This is already pretty good. We got some wind. Let's back off this release. The key modulation you want to add here is slow movement of this filter envelope. So we're going to go to filter LFO here. We have a triangle. This will do just fine. We'll do slow frequency, increase the intensity. So obviously this is too much and we can hear the resonance. So we're going to drop the intensity. You can add some whistling by hand. Right? So that works pretty nice. That's your basic beginner wind. Okay. Now how can we spice it up? Well, we can add another filter in parallel, right? Because we're focusing kind of on the low end of the wind, let's highlight the higher end of the wind. So if we go to the wind that I already made here, you will notice that two filters are on. We have, and the low pass filter we just talked about, and I also have a band pass filter to create that tighter upper range. So let's listen just to the low pass filter. I'm going to turn this off. Right? That's basically what we have so far. Now let's just look at the band pass filter. Okay, so this is what's happening here. We have a band pass filter with sort of a moderate cutoff, right? So we're not getting all those low frequencies and not quite getting the high frequency. I also increase the resonance, right, on this band pass filter to get a bit more of the whistling. The magic is when both of these filters are on and they're in a parallel mode, because then each component of the sound will be shaped simultaneously and we'll get these layers. Okay, that's your intermediate wind. Now for advanced wind, we need to move to some effects. There are actually already some here. So we can turn that off, the reverb mainly, and it sounds like this. It's pretty good. But if we add reverb, we'll get a little bit more space here. Now what kind of reverb, you ask? Well, there's a setting called less infinite space. That's pretty long-tailed reverb with a good amount of low frequency content, right? To simulate a large space. So this is lots of reverb. This sounds almost like wind is in a distance or removed behind some barriers. We can dial this in. This is pretty dry. Again, we have size here. So this is huge size. So these are finer settings, and it's really about dialing in the exact panorama and spacing that you want your wind to have. And there you go. A wind on an analog synthesizer. All right, let's move to rain. So here's how the rain sounds like that I made. Okay, we are working with noise again here, right? So let's start again from the beginner level, how to make rain. We're going to go back, turn this off, we're going to go back sort of to the empty patch here. This is where we had our wind, okay? So with rain, we actually want to focus on high frequency, right? So if we go back to the noise oscillator, we're going to boost this speckle all the way up. Instead of having a high pass filter, low pass filter like we have now, we want to have a high pass filter. So I'm going to go to MS-20 high pass filter emulation here. Right, so you can hear the high pass filter in action. Right, so depending on the spacing and how far the rain is or how fast it's falling, it's really going to affect the frequency distribution that you want to zero in on. But something like this is okay for now. A little resonance. We're going to add an amp, a slower amp envelope again, just so it's a bit more playable. But now it kind of sounds rainish, but it doesn't. So what's the key thing that you want to add here? And the key thing is a fast sample and hold or random LFO that will modulate either the amp or the filter. So let's look at that. We had this triangle LFO, but we had moved that to sample and hold. So there's several random options here. I'm going to go for this one because it's a bit more natural. It's not just stepwise, but it's a bit linear. So that's going to go to this filter. So let's see how that sounds if we increase the intensity. So if we have a bit slower rate. So it already sounds a little bit like the washes, but in order to basically simulate the pitter-patter of rain, we want to speed this up. Doesn't sound very rainy, but it will once we decrease the intensity. Right, so now we're getting just the right level of burst. Notice that you really got to dial this in finely. This is completely unnatural. This is a little negative. Here we're not getting anything. We want just a little bit. Right, so that's a key part there. And there's your basic rain. However, we want to do even better. Let's go to the intermediate level of making rain. The intermediate level simply involves more LFOs. So let's go to the amplitude LFO and let's add another sample and hold LFO, maybe a slightly different shape, something like this. And again, we want to hear. So now you can hear really the amplitude variations. Let's speed it up. Maybe not the same speed, also fast, but a little less, again, to add to the richness. And now reduce the intensity. So already we have a bit more dynamic, realistic rain here. Right. And finally, for the advanced level, what do we do there? Well, it's all about effects and pitch. So to further make this really cool, we're going to go to pitch modulation. And again, we can go to a sample and hold, pick a shape that we like. Let's listen to it slow. So the pitch changes are not going to be as pronounced because this is noise. Right? But it does add some dynamic. And you'll notice that we have that reverb here as well. If we turn it off, but with reverb, we just get a bit more spaciousness. And finally, a really important thing to consider is distortion that can really add life to these storm sounds. And for that, let's add some distortion and see how that sounds. So vintage distortion. So this is dry. Let's add some distortion. Magic happens here, guys. All of a sudden you're starting to kind of layer a farther sound of rain and a near sound of rain. A little delay, reverb. And we get a slight natural wind in the background. So when it's all put together, sounds something like this. And that is your rain from beginner to advanced. And finally, thunder. Now, thunder is a little bit tough, okay? So how do we start with thunder? What do we do with thunder? Let's go back again sort of to that basic noise. Now with thunder, again, we want to focus on some of those lower frequencies, but there's lots of options here because really the magic is going to happen with envelopes and with other things. So I'm going to go back to a low pass filter here, which is really important. We're going to turn these effects off. Okay, we're going to turn these LFOs off. Okay, so here we are with the basic noise. So what do we do here? Well, first we need to think about the envelope, right? The thunder has the big bang and then it recedes in volume. And the same thing happens with the frequency spectrum. So let's start with the amp envelope. So we're going to have an almost instantaneous attack, then quite a significant decay. So there's a ways to do thunder such as that you can get a whole sound of thunder where you're holding the key down or that you just trigger the thunder. That depends on how you want to use the sound. But the basic thing is you want this burst, right, in the beginning. And we want to do the same with the filter. So if we go to the filter envelope, again we have Monopoly low pass filter emulation here. We're going to have a near instantaneous attack. We're going to reduce that sustain and have that decay that matches pretty close with the amplitude envelope here. Okay? You gotta play with the envelope intensity because the timing thing is really important. So something like this works pretty well. Okay. So that's your beginner thunder. It doesn't sound that great, but it's something to work with. Now moving to intermediate. We want to think about that rumble, right? So once this passes, you're going to have the low end rumble. So maybe for that we can use a filter LFO using a random sample and hold. Let's hear how that sounds. Find the right speed first. Maybe something like that. Especially if you have a vast space with some hills, you're going to have these kind of delayed echoes. Okay, that's a little better. Maybe we'll go back here, reduce the speckle. Let's try that. Yeah, I almost like that a little better. Yeah. So that's your intermediate thunder. And then for advanced thunder, we want to do a couple other things. And those things are pitch envelope and again, distortion as well as reverb. So if you listen carefully, you'll notice that there's a pitch drop with the thunder as well. So we want to add a pitch envelope if we can, right here. So it's already sounding more thunderish. So you can play with attack, maybe pretty instantaneous attack. There we go. And to make this really sing, we're going back to distortion. Now listen to what happens when we add distortion to this. And add drive. It'll require careful experimenting as well as adding some reverb. And once you put it all together, it sounds something like this. Right? Because you're trying to get that big impact, lots of high frequency content, the pitch drop, and this kind of low end rumble at the end. And once you put all this together, you definitely have a storm. So there you have it, how to make storm sounds on any synth. I really hope this was helpful and that you can go further on your ambient natural sound journey with this newfound knowledge. Please put some comments down below of how you use nature sounds and storm sound in your music. See you on the other side.